Good afternoon and welcome. This is a special meeting of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force called for Thursday, April 21st, 2011 at 4 p.m. and beginning at 4:08 p.m. We have the roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Member Snyder?
Here.
Snyder present. Member Nee?
Here.
Nee present. Member Cawthon? Cawthon present. Member Manny?
Present.
Manny present. Member Washburn? Washburn excused. Member Caneva? Caneva excused. Member Costa?
Here.
Costa present. Member Wolf?
Here.
Wolf present. Member Chan? Chan excused. Member Johnson? Johnson excused. Member West?
Here.
West present. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any requested changes to today's agenda?
There are no requests, Mr. Chair.
Okay, members? Seeing none, let us proceed. Could you call the first item, please?
The first item is the possible response to Ethics Commission staff ruling on Task Force case number 09042, Peter Wolfe against the San Francisco Public Library.
Okay, this is a matter that I have brought before us. And the reason I did was after looking at the letter that John St. Croix, the Executive Director of the Ethics Commission, sent to us regarding this matter. Quite frankly, I was deeply troubled by the logic that he used. I was deeply troubled by the whole attitude of their asserting themselves into what the task forces and our committee's bylaws should or should not state in order to be relevant to a case and in order to be relevant to whether the sunshine laws apply. What I'd like to know is, have all of you had a chance to, number one, have all of you had a chance to read the letter that I have drafted? Okay. Basically what this letter does, it throws down the gauntlet. It is, you know, it's pretty stern in tone. And what I want to know from the task force and from members of the public is, you know, do we want to square off with ethics in this fashion? Number one, is there any part of the letter that some of you might want to maybe revisit, rewrite? And number two, I have addressed this draft. In the draft, I have addressed it only to Benedict Herr, who is the chairman of the Ethics Commission. Do we want to address it to all members of the Ethics Commission? The task force will welcome any comments. I'm sorry, I will welcome any comments. Member Wolf.
Yeah, I agree with your findings, and I also do feel that they've overstepped their bounds. I don't think there was any reason for them to investigate anything. We've already done the investigation for them and found what we ordered, and they were just supposed to enforce it. So, yeah, I agree. I think your letter here is, I haven't had a chance to finish reading through it, but I think it offers a good demeanor as a response.
Okay, I sent it earlier, but I wrote it just a night or two ago. So I've been busy, would have liked to have gotten to it earlier, but I got to it when I could. Member Snyder.
Similar to Member Wolf, I agree that their interpretation isn't really very well supported, and it just stands. It in some ways it's absurd because it proposes that nobody's required to show up to committee meetings, which would essentially make no respondents are required to show up to committee meetings, which would make the work of the committees useless if there were no requirement that respondents appear. So I agree with Member Wolf that the impetus behind the letter is a good one, and I agree with the general proposition. I haven't had a chance to look carefully at the letter myself, so.
Okay, well, let me just...
Mr. Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Member Wolf.
Can we revisit this, table it to the end or towards the end of the meeting? So
Well, what we could do is, well, okay.
You know, maybe it'd just be easier. People, you know, when they have an opportunity, can glance through it if we take a break or something in between, I think we all want to have an opportunity to read it.
That's fine. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this note? Three. Thank you for coming, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Peter Warfield, Library Users Association. First of all, well, there's a great deal to be said about this. And extending what Member Wolf says, I would urge you to table this, or whatever it's called, postpone taking this matter up until you have properly put it on an agenda and given everybody, including the public, a reasonable chance to respond. This letter from the Ethics Commission is a very serious matter and would certainly have very serious impacts on the ability of the Sunshine Task Force to do its business if, in fact, their ruling were to essentially stand unchallenged and become the guiding principle for departments against which complaints have been filed. So let me point out some very serious problems about what's going on, the fact that you're even considering this. The Ethics Commission sent that letter April 6th. I did not get any copy of that letter from the Sunshine Task Force, and if, as it seems to be indicated on the agenda, I have some role in this, then it seems to me, by chance finding out about it, when I opened the routine announcement of an agenda for a special meeting, I think is not respecting the complainants who come before you and treating them with reasonable notification about matters that they would be concerned about. I also note that this is the 15 minutes before the usual time of the Library Commission meeting on the third Thursday. I don't know whether you were aware or when you were aware that that meeting was canceled, but there's also now a Planning Commission meeting that's taking up an extremely urgent and important matter about the future of the library. I'm dismayed also by the essentially, let's talk about the agenda item. This is not a case that I brought, as it says here. It is a commission, an ethics commission ruling on a task force complaint that grew out of a complaint that I filed, and I had nothing to do with the complaint that was filed by you against the library for its refusal to appear at 2 committee meetings. I'm glad that you brought a complaint, and I wish over the years that you had brought routinely complaints of this kind, but thank you for bringing the complaint. You brought it. You are the people that the Ethics Commission is responding to. At least the Ethics Commission gave me a CC. This agenda item is incorrectly stated. Peter Warfield has nothing to do with this except as the case under which this came up. There's no indication of explanatory documents here or any link to it or any name of an explanatory document, and there's no indication of what the possible action is. And to have a letter dropped on us 2 weeks after the Ethics Commission and having to consider it during the meeting, I think is really an insult to due process and reasonable consideration. So I urge you to write this agenda item properly and consider it at a subsequent meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for your information, Mr. Worf, and thank you for your points. They're very well taken. We did not get copies of the Ethics Commission letter until a few days ago. So, you know, there was when I got it, that's when I decided this should go on today's agenda.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was dated April 6th, and I'm wondering if it
that.
wasn't sent to you. But in any case, I haven't received this nor this letter except at the front of the room here just now. And if that's another problem with ethics, that only adds to what I'm suggesting.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there a further public comment on this item?
Members of the task force, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Let's not play fools. Basically, what Mr. St. Croix is doing is he is cutting your nuts off. He's basically saying, we're going to make it so that nobody has to come to a subcommittee meeting. No ethics committee, no EOT, no EOT, no compliance and amendments. And basically, that's what they want. They want you emasculated to the point where everybody in the city government can simply say, we don't even have to go. They can't find us in violation. Ethics Commission says so. And if anybody is trying to really believe that this is some sort of a misunderstanding on Mr. St. Croix's part, Mr. St. Croix plays the part of a Middle Eastern potentate. He sits over there and he arbitrarily decides what will and will not go before the Ethics Commission. It's like much of the government where the political people sort of come and go, and it's the civil servants who run it. Have you ever seen the British show, Yes, Minister? Where all the government ministers come in and they're saying, oh, do this and do that, and in the meantime, it's the British civil service that is really making all the decisions about what's going on. This is done with the sole intention of simply gutting you completely. It will get to the point where there will be absolutely nothing you can do but have every single item on every single agenda heard before the full task force, because that is the only place you will be able to get someone to appear, and subsequently it would be the only place you'll be able to find them in violation. That's what this is intended to do. Now, the same thing goes with the city attorney. The city attorney, in my respect, he wants to be the mayor of this city, and I would vote for Dick Cheney before I would vote for him. Why? Because he is the greatest person who fights open government. He's at the nexus of all of this. Every time I have brought a case before you, it's the city attorney saying, oh no, the good government guide says you don't really have to do that. I don't care what the law says. I'm saying that the law doesn't mean what it says. It means something else. Now, I'm going to tell you, you participate in this. The last thing I found where you got, the last determination I got where you find the Library Commission in violation for not including 150 words in the statement, and then you put a dishonest statement of law in there that you said this committee made a determination that noting it in it and putting it as an attachment was appropriate. That is a lie. L-I-E, lie. It is a falsehood. I checked with Mr. Rustum. There was no determination. There was no finding because there was no case. You have never officially said that placing these issues in as an appendage satisfies the requirement which says placed in the minutes. And yet what you did is you gave the determination and sent it off to be obeyed. Don't blame anybody but yourself on this.
Thank you. Is there further public comment on this item?
Yes, hi, my name is Jason Grant-Cars, and I've been coming in front of this commission for years because I was a fool. I believed in what sunshine was supposed to stand for. I didn't know this was the ministry of sunshine. You know, he talks about, you know, having your balls cut off and being, you know, impotent and everything. Well, you know, we've already got articles written years ago about 14 times you referring something up to Ethics Commission and proving that you're impotent anyway. You know, years ago, 10 years ago, I made the suggestion, the Orange Jude Amendment, that you step aside until you're granted power, but you continue to play this game. And it's continued to be perpetuated on you, and you'll continue to be good cop, bad cop. Oh, we're really trying. Oh, it's the other person's fault, and they'll turn it and spin it some other way. In the meantime, the people who you're disserving is all of us, because this is honestly the ministry of sunshine, where everything is an illusion. Everything is a lie because there's no accountability. You've even been told so by the Ethics Commission. As a matter of fact, in my own particular case, in which you found Mrs. Shields to be wrong, even though that was, you know, belated and late, which is of course natural for you guys, when it got pushed up to the Ethics Commission, you were overruled again. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I'm hoping that, you know, before I die, that maybe I'll be surprised in my life, and maybe you people will do the right thing and step down as opposed to continuing to offer false hope, false promise, false premises, everything, because all of this is worse than no help at all. Because what you're doing is you're taking people's energy, their life force, their souls, everything that they believe in to come for you to adjudicate, only to be impotent, you know, having your balls cut off, already having known it for 10 years, and to continue the illusion. It's marvelous.
Thank you. Is there further public comment on this item?
Good evening, Thomas Piccarello. I want to applaud the author of this letter. I think it shows great self-restraint in terms of the action recommended by Mr. St. Croix. As we all know, the problems are getting orders of determination enforced by the Ethics Commission, and it appears that Mr. St. Croix is the impediment for enforcing orders of determination. And his letter of April 6th is one example of why orders of determination are not enforced by the Ethics Commission. My only comment regarding the letter would be that I don't believe the statement that the bylaws are not relevant is incorrect. I think that your bylaws are relevant, and your bylaws do provide that the subcommittees are to advise the full task force of ongoing functions. And without an appearance by a city official, the subcommittees would not be able to advise the task force. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further public comment on this item? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Member Cawthon, and then Member Wolf.
I just have a question. Why don't we have an attorney here today? Why don't we have an attorney here today?
Mr. Threed has informed us that under ordinary circumstances he will not attend special meetings. As we're all aware, the city attorney's office has restricted the number of hours that the deputy city attorney can devote to work for the task force. Budgetary reasons.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Member Wolf?
Yeah, I just want to notate the concept of what Mr. St. Croix refers to our bylaws. Our bylaws aren't really what is at focus here. It's the ordinance. The ordinance is at focus, and I think we should, correct him on that notion. The bylaws is purely for our internal use. It doesn't specify. It's not supposed to even specify what the process is supposed to be per se with regards to the requirements of the respondents. The requirements of the respondents is well laid out in the Sunshine Ordinance, and I think we should refer to the Sunshine Ordinance and make him refer to the ordinance rather than try to attack our bylaws. I think our bylaws are not meant for that purpose. So if there is any further discussion later on this, then I think that should be something that we should explore.
Member Cawthon?
Yeah, I have a further comment on this. We had exactly the same problem with the library CAC, and somebody was
In
quoting...
the microphone, please. We can't hear you.
I don't know what's happening. Something wrong with this microphone. We had the same problem with the library CAC, and someone kept on quoting the bylaws and not looking to the ordinance, which was the document created by the Board of Supervisors. So as the Sunshine Ordinance is the document that the voters passed, and the bylaws is really a man-made document. Obviously, the ordinance is our first authority, if not our primary one.
Okay.
Oof.
At this point, we are going to table this until the end of the meeting. Mr. Clerk, could you call the next item, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, would you like to combine items 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7?
That is the advice we've received from Deputy City Attorney Threet. The reason is that these are all relevant to a single set of complaints. Items 11011 and 11012 basically are repetitions of 11010. They do not add they are not separate complaints, but rather merely repeat or support the complaints. The second and third complaints merely support the first one. So without objection, items 2, 4, and 6 are combined, and items 3, 5, and 7 are combined. 2, 4, and 6 deal with jurisdiction, 3, 5, and 7 deal with substance. Without objection? Okay. Items 2, 4, and 6 are jurisdictional items. The chair will entertain a motion.
Should there not be public comment on that? Or is, if we're going to be combining items on the agenda?
I don't think it's necessary.
Well,
It's a procedural decision by the task force.
okay, if it's procedural, then I'll concede, but I'm just asking.
I believe it's a procedural decision by the task force.
Okay.
It will not in any way undercut our finding of jurisdiction or non-jurisdiction, and it will not in any way undercut our weighing of the substance of these complaints.
Okay. Thank you.
The chair will entertain a motion to find jurisdiction or not on items on complaint numbers 11010, 11011, and 11012. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there public comment? And as I understand it, jurisdiction has not been contested by the respondent. Is there any public comment on the question of jurisdiction? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Discussion? Roll call, please.
On jurisdiction, Member Snyder.
Aye.
Snyder, aye. Member Cawthon. Cawthon, aye. Member Manny.
Aye.
Manny, aye. Member Costa.
Aye.
Costa, aye. Member Wolf.
Aye.
Wolf, aye. Member West.
Aye.
West, aye. Member Nee.
Aye.
Nee, aye. Mr. Chair, we have 7 ayes. The motion passes.
That takes us to substance. Mr. Garza, please approach. Thank you for coming, sir. You have 5 minutes.
First of all, I'd like to interject into the record that I object to everything being combined, because these are IDRs, which is for timeliness and immediacy, and they were all over different periods to reflect the character or lack of it thereof of the other side, the respondent. You know, these are all IDRs. They weren't all done at the same time, so to combine them would sort of gloss over that fact that they had to be filled within 24 hours, respectively, of when they were filed, each and every one. I can understand maybe for your procedural, thinking you might want to do it, but I don't really believe it's fair to me, the complainant, because I believe all these issues should be addressed and be addressed respectively. Also, I got a letter from Mr. Treat stating that, that somehow this was my fault for them being scheduled past the 45 days, which wasn't true. I don't understand why this took longer than 45 days, and my supporting documentation shows that I submitted everything correctly. His assertion that I somehow on 3/2 in March, had these generated is not true. Mr. Rustum did it, and now that he's here, I'd like for that question to be asked to him as to, why these got scheduled so late, concerning that, I did everything correctly. And how is that in my due process? Just to start off with, because these are immediate disclosure requests. All right, so now where would you like for me to begin? On which item? The very first one? All of them? There's 3 different ones here. What would you like for me to do to be helpful and respectful to your rig process?
To your 5 minutes, sir.
Basically, everything that I've asked for, I'm entitled to. They received money from the city. And I've not received anything, timely or any otherwise.
Thank you. Is there anybody to present facts and evidence in support of the complainant?
Yes, Ray Hart's Director, San Francisco Open Government. I have to agree with Mr. Garza. You have really screwed him royally. You agendize these as separate items. Each of them is noted as a 45-minute item, and then you take, without any notification to him, and combine them all into one item and give him 5 minutes to cover everything. Do you really honestly think that's an honest way to deal with any member of the public? It's your own agenda. And you didn't even ask him if he had an objection. You just basically did it. And then, Mr. Nee, you just sit there and you act, oh, it's your 5 minutes. You are so disrespectful to members of the public. People who come here and try to present a case to you, you can't even follow your own agenda. Maybe these are the rules that you passed when you said the police department didn't have to follow, the police commission didn't have to follow any rules, not even Robert's rules. They can do anything they want to do. Last night they did the same thing. They covered number 5 on the agenda. They went into closed session for an hour and a half, forced all the members of the public to leave, and then they came back and did everything else on the agenda with one member of the public who stayed. They disenfranchised the voters of this city, the citizens of this city, and you participate in it. And this is what you're doing to Mr. Garza. He's got 3 separate cases on the agenda without any sort of with any sort of understanding of that situation. You simply combined them all and said, okay, you got 5 minutes to deal with it all. If somebody did that to you, I think you'd be screaming. And it's really funny how many of you can just look down at your desk and you haven't got enough courage to look people in the eye. You're more interested in looking at something that's sitting on the desk than you are in dealing with people in the public. I have no surprise that you have lost respect of this community. The simple fact is that nobody who was interested in open government even bothers to come here anymore. That's how discouraged it is. And over the last 12 years, what have you managed to accomplish? Anything? Nothing. You haven't, you know, the whole thing that Mr. The communications director, Matt Dorsey, said about you. How about you go after honest city employees, trying to get them fired? What city employee, what commission member over the last 12 years has suffered anything, even a reprimand, from any single thing you've done? And now you screw Mr. Garza. And there's no polite way of saying it. You screwed him. And I think it was Mr. Nee, because he has a habit of screwing people as a regular course of events.
Thank you. Is there anybody else to present facts and evidence in support of the complainant? Seeing none, is the respondent present? Please approach. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Vitka Eisen. I'm the CEO of Haight-Ashbury Free Clinics Incorporated. To the best of my ability, I've tried to put together a list of all the things that Mr. Garza requested and emailed them to him this week. So I'm surprised that he didn't get them. I have them here. I wasn't really quite sure whether they should go directly to Mr. Garza or whether they should go via the task force. I'm not familiar with that process, so I wasn't sure whether it should have gone through the task force to Mr. Garza. So I have a copy of each of the documents that I sent. I can run through them. You can have the copies. These are all public records. I believe everything, we responded to all of his requests that are public, that can be made public. There were at least 13 different items, I think, and I sent them. If you have any questions, I can answer them. But yeah, sure.
Not now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you want these, or how does this work?
If those documents are, if they are for Mr. Garza, then please give them to Mr. Garza.
Okay. Thanks.
Is there anybody to present facts and evidence in support of the respondent? Seeing none, the matter is with the task force. Member Cawthon?
I have a question for, I'm sorry I didn't get your name. Could you just come up to the podium, please? I know you said you were the CEO, but I didn't get your name, and I almost recused myself from this item because I used to work for the free clinic. But in any event, do you get a notice every year that you have to sign that you have read the Sunshine Ordinance? Because all the departments do. We get it, and we're required to read the Sunshine Ordinance and or go to a seminar explaining the ordinance. And I think that's the problem, that you don't. If in fact that I'm correct that you did not you don't have that requirement because you're a
We
because you're a
looked for it.
nonprofit.
We have right. We're a nonprofit, so it is embedded in our contract with the city that we are familiar with the Sunshine Ordinance, and to the degree that it applies to nonprofits. In fact, there's some public meetings we do comply with that. We have some meetings that we have to post notices
Right.
about. So we're in. That's what I think that's what the requirement is, and it's in our master contract with the Department of Public Health, also included in here as well. And regarding an annual training, I'm not familiar with that, and I don't know that that is a requirement for the contractors of the Department of Public Health.
Well, I don't either, but
Yeah, I mean, it
that's
might be.
why-
I
That's
really
why I'm
don't
asking,
know.
but I'm saying even if it isn't, I think it would be very good for someone in the clinic to familiarize themselves with Sunshine. Usually there's a custodian of records so that these issues don't come up. So that's my suggestion.
The requirements of Sunshine are a bit different for nonprofits than they are for city entities. What I want to know is, has the clinic agreed in your contract to abide by the Sunshine Ordinance itself?
Yes.
You have.
Well, it's embedded in the contract. So if you sign the contract, incorporated within the master contract. Now, just be aware that the primary care services side of the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic is not a city-funded entity. But there's a couple of lines of service within the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinics Incorporated. One of them is behavioral health. The behavioral health side of the operation or services is funded by Department of Public Health, and within that master contract, it's noted that you must comply with the Sunshine Ordinance, and it describes lifts it out of the Sunshine Ordinance, the pieces of the ordinance that are applicable to city-funded nonprofits.
And which pieces are those?
I think the public meeting piece, that what records you have to make available, that you have to make your financials, your audited financials, that your city contract may be made available. So I think those are the pieces that I recall.
Well, those are under 12L. Those are under Sunshine.
Isn't that a part of Sunshine?
No,
No.
those are 12L. What I am asking is, there are some nonprofits that, and some for-profit entities, private sector entities, companies that do business with the city, and in their contracts with the city, they agree to abide by the terms, by the provisions of the Sunshine Ordinance specifically. What I want to know is if that is part of the contract between the city and the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic.
They reference 12L, so I'm not quite sure. This is what's in the contract, and it says Sunshine Ordinance Summary of the Nonprofit Public Access Ordinance. This is taken directly from our contract, and it references, I believe, it references 12L, and it goes
Okay.
12L.1 through 12L.
So there is not in
Okay.
your contract a provision under which you have agreed to abide by the terms of the Sunshine Ordinance itself, other than as it applies to nonprofits. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I need to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Member Wolf.
Yes. Just for our edification, does the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic receive more than $250,000 in cumulative city funds?
Yes.
It does?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And you had mentioned that they are specified for specific services, or are they free to be used at your discretion?
The funds? The
Yeah.
funds are for specific services, but they're the grant, if you will, or the funds are to the corporate entity. So we comply as an organization, we comply with what's in our contract for the entire organization. I wouldn't carve it out and say, well, that's clinic, it's separate. It's
Okay.
part of the entire organization.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am, just one other question. You have three immediate disclosure requests from Mr. Garza. One is dated December 12th, 2010. Another is dated January 21st, 2010, or I'm sorry, January 12th, 2010, and another dated January 21st, or 2011. It is now April 21st, and you're just now bringing him a packet. Why did it take so long?
In regards to the, I didn't come on as the CEO until January, so I can't really speak to the, wasn't there. I came on in January. At that time, we had an appointment to come here. I came and had sent the records, I believe, in advance of that. And then there were several, the meeting, it was tabled at that meeting, so it was never, to my knowledge, it wasn't heard. At that point, I thought it was, and this is ignorance, I have to say, I thought it was a matter now of disclosing records to the public. I wasn't sure it was between Mr. Garza and the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, or between Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic and the task force as well. So I actually thought we were supposed to respond within the timeline of the task force, if you will. I wasn't quite sure what the timeline on that was.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, there was kind of some stacked complaints. I wasn't quite sure which ones were overlapping, so it took some time to sort it through.
Thank you.
Okay.
At this time, please remain at the microphone. At this time, the respondent and then the complainant will each have 3 minutes to make any concluding or rebutting remarks. Please proceed.
It is not the intent of Haight-Ashbury Free Clinics to deny individuals access to information that is open and public information. It's our desire to, we're a public benefit organization there to serve the community and the public, and that's our commitment.
Thank you. Mr. Garza?
Regardless of whether it's their intent or not, it's what's happened. So intent, or, you know, crocodile tears, or any other superficious, extraordinarily dubious response from the interim CEO, you know, it doesn't address the prior CEO. Was he incompetent and negligent when these things were turned in? As a matter of fact, she did bring up the interesting case about the fact that you tabled 10071, my original, the fourth part of this, against Haight-Ashbury for, you know, that you tabled against, you know, without even asking me. That's one of the things I plan on bringing up and asking when you're going to reschedule that one. Just continues to go along with all of this, that, you know, nothing is being run per the rules, past the 24 hours, open and shut. She wants to give me something now. Is this stuff that she gives me, will it be, you know, if it's not correct, will I have the chance to come back and tell you it's not correct? Is the stuff that she's given me, is it, you know, under penalty of perjury as being correct for everything that I'm asking for? Or is this simply just another dollar late, day late, flimsy excuse to say, oh, well, we really care? Well, this is the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, where I was denied medical care. I came to get my medical records to prove my case for an IDR. I went in there suffering chest pains. It's been 4 months. Do I have any expectations to continue to get screwed by you guys? And them. You know, prove me wrong. Do the right thing. Surprise me. But as far as, you know, letting them off the hook for what they're supposed to be responsible for a sunshine thing and everything else, and, you know, for your guys' incorrect procedure of not scheduling this the way it should have been scheduled, which, of course, Mr. Rustum hasn't answered to, the city attorney hasn't answered to, and, of course, naturally, you won't answer to. Thank you for continuing to screw me, the only person who's right, dead right.
Thank you. The matter's back with the task force. Member Coughlin?
Yeah, I think it's very clear that they did not respond to an IDR properly, so that would certainly be a violation, and that would be my recommendation, that we find violation for failure to respond adequately to an IDR.
67.25.
Section 67.25, what is it? D?
Is that a motion?
It is a motion.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Member Wolf.
I'm wondering if also Section 12L5 applies. Public access to records.
I do not believe it does. Because Section 12L5 specifies the kind of records that apply. Those are financial records. And if you look at on page 11 of our packet, those are not the kinds of records that are being requested here. Now, I'm not saying that they should not be provided to Mr. Garza. But what I am saying is that 12L, no section of 12L requires it.
Right.
The provision of these specific kinds of information that he's requesting.
Thank you.
Is there public comment on this item? Mr. Piccirillo, did you comment as a party? Okay.
No, sir. Thomas Piccirillo. First, let me, I want to compliment the chair, the way that you consolidated these matters. Despite the protestations by Mr. Garza, you did him a favor. Your agendas are way too long, and one of the ways that you can expedite your agendas is to consolidate matters where there is the same complainant and the same respondent agencies. And by consolidating his 3 cases, you resolved all 3 cases in 15, 20 minutes. Had you taken these separately, you would have been on these for an hour and a half. So I applaud the chair. When there are more than one complaint by the same complainant and the respondent is the same city department, then you should consolidate more regularly. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further public comment on this item? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Matter is back with the task force. Is there further discussion? Okay, the motion is to find violation of 67.25. Roll call, please.
On the motion, Member Snyder?
Aye.
Snyder, aye. Member Cawthon? Aye. Cawthon, aye. Member Manny?
Aye.
Manny, aye. Member Costa?
Aye.
Costa, aye. Member Wolf?
Aye.
Wolf, aye. Member West?
Aye.
West, aye. Member Nee?
Aye.
Nee, aye. Mr. Chair, we have 7 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. This matter is now referred to the Education Outreach and Training Committee.
Mr. Chair, what is the requirement?
I'm sorry?
What is the requirement of the respondent?
Well, the respondent should
I'm sorry, I'll send you
the violation that the task force has found here is one of 67.25. That deals with timely response to immediate disclosure requests. And so that is a matter that the Education, Outreach, and Training Committee is, I think, best suited to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Point of information.
Member Wolf, Member Cawthon.
Did the respondent testify that they actually delivered the documents to Mr. Garza?
The respondent has brought a packet with her and offered to hand it to Mr. Garza, and if I saw correctly, Mr. Garza declined to accept them.
The only reason why I question is because we don't know if they're the correct items that Mr. Garza was originally asked for. I would rather see it go to compliance and amendments to make sure that all the documents Mr. Garza had requested were the
The documents Mr. Garza requested are not required under 12L.
But we just made a ruling on Sunshine.
We made a ruling on the timeliness of response to an immediate disclosure request.
And the content of the request?
The response does not necessarily entail the actual furnishing of the documents. The response merely means we have received your request. The response required within 24 hours of receipt of the IDR is we have received your request and will make our best effort to provide it on a timely basis, on a rolling basis, whatever. That just deals with the timeliness of
The delivery.
a response to the request.
Okay. So we're just dealing with the delivery of the items, not necessarily whether the items themselves were correct or not.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, you had a... Please approach the microphone.
Just a point of clarification, documents were emailed to Mr. Garza as well.
Documents were emails to Mr. Garza.
Yeah, they were delivered via email.
Okay, are those emails also what appears in our packet?
No, I haven't submitted any of the documents, but I could submit the email, which would date stamp it.
Are those
essentially.
emails responsive to his request?
It's the same, it's everything that's in the packet.
Are those emails responsive to his request?
That, to the best of my knowledge, they are there, but they were not within 20, an email did not come within 24 hours.
Understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Again, this matter is, Ms.
Am I afforded the same luxury, or am I once again screwed by rigged
Please
process?
speak.
The whole issue here, about your 12L rests on the case about whether you believe what she said about the contract in Sunshine. You haven't even viewed it. She stated that they may fall under Sunshine because of the master contract. But yet you're going to shove all this aside. Once again, conveniently. Thank you, Mr. Nee, without seeing anything. Where is the copy of this so that I can review it to make sure that you made the correct decision? You never cease to astound me.
Thank you. Again, this matter is referred to the Education Outreach and Training Committee.
I have a
Member
comment.
Cawthon?
One of the things that I had a problem with when I was on the EOTC was that things would be referred to us, and there was really nothing we could do with them. For example, the department said, we've complied with the request, you've got all the documents. The complainant would say, no, we don't. And I just found myself at an impasse. The same thing with with the CEO of the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. She now knows that you have to respond to an IDR in 24 hours. But I mean, what is the action required at the EOTC? Is she supposed to say, we pledge we will henceforth respond in 24 hours to the... That was the problem I had, that I didn't know what the EOTC was supposed to do when there was a nebulous situation. So anybody has any ideas, I'm all open to it.
Well, Ms. Cawthon, even though you are no longer on the EOTC, perhaps when the new EOTC is constituted, and I am seeking, trying to seek volunteers for it, perhaps you would continue to attend their meetings as you are able and to contribute your ideas in this matter.
Continue what?
Contribute your
Contribute
ideas
my ideas.
in this matter.
Well, the reason I had to resign, I don't mean to get into a big, medical feel sorry for me thing, but my doctor did tell me to cut back. And so that was my way of cutting back.
Understand. And we thank you for the time that you have put in on the committee.
Thank you.
It is almost 5 o'clock, which is the time usually set aside for general public comment. Without objection, we will proceed to general public comment now. Is there anybody to offer comment on items not on today's agenda? Thank you, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, part of my public comment is your time period faulty process for the IDRs, my submission, and naturally your rig process about not processing them in 45 days, as has been apparent in this last case. Also, I need to know about case number 10071, which is the first IDR I filed against Haight-Ashbury, which you tabled concerning my IDR. That has not been brought up. I'd like to have an answer to that. Secondly, I'd like for Mr. Rustum here to explain to you why, when I sent everything in properly, I wasn't, scheduled properly, and then Mr. Need to answer why he sent me a bogus email saying that, this is the procedure, and when I wrote back and said, well, I complied with the procedure, he never responded. I would like some answers to all this rigged process that I'm being thrown into, concerning coming here, which I've been coming here for 10 years, and every time I come here, it's rigged. And then when you make a decision, ethics is rigged also. So, it's beyond me. Also, one of the main things that I'm having a very hard time with is, like I said, I'm trying to get my medical records for denial of medical care, and in case 1071, they're going to say that they're not, they didn't violate, that I have to sign a HIPAA release form to get these medical records, which isn't true. As a matter of fact, I now have a thing from licensing and certification stating that Haight-Ashbury did break the HIPAA law. So, I would love to be able to present my arguments to you in a timely, reasonable fashion, but, you guys do whatever you want. You incorporate my 3 cases, you come up with 12L excuses, you allow her to, lead you down the golden path that, it's in the master thing, but that's not really what it says without looking at it. You just accept that. You allow Mr. Treat to mislead you, and you just accept that. You don't question your own administrator for his faults, and you just accept that. What are you doing for me?
Thank you. Is there further general public comment?
Thomas Piccarello. I'm sure Mr. Costa and Mr. West are maybe reconsidering whether or not that they want to sit on this task force after hearing some of the abuse. The abuse, stems from frustration of not getting records and not being allowed public comment. So this task force does do good things. I've experienced much more responses from city departments and city agencies just by filing a sunshine complaint. That said, let me just, last week I filed another online complaint against the clerk of the Board of Supervisors for not providing timely and accurate minutes. I haven't received a response by your staff. And this is like the second or third time I've filed a complaint online without an acknowledgement by your staff of receiving the complaint. So there should be some protocol to have a reasonable response by your staff once a complaint is received online. So rather than have me waiting until, a week, 10 days that they got my complaint. So perhaps 2 or 3 days would be a better protocol. And finally, let me say this. I think it'd be a good idea that if you fill the ex officio seats, I think one is the mayoral appointment. I'm not sure who appoints the other one. But just to have, somebody from the mayor's office and this, I don't know if it's a controller or assessor, or whoever.
Clerk of the board.
Clerk of the board? All right, thank you. They should, even though they don't vote, they should be present. They should be sitting here and watching the proceedings and seeing some of the problems that both the members of the public as well as the task force have in trying to implement the Sunshine Ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further general public comment?
Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Mr. Rustum, I'd appreciate if you let me know when I have 1 minute left. 40 years ago this year, I raised my hand at the Armed Forces Entrance and Examining Station in Coral Gables, Florida, and I swore to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same, so help me God. And the day I took that oath, I realized it was something I was never going to be able to lay down. For the simple fact is basically that Constitution had given me the protections it offers to all of us for 21 years of my life, and I'd never even had to do anything to receive that. And I knew I had to pay it back. And the reason I come here is not to be popular. I know you guys probably think I'm an asshole. But you basically are here to defend the constitutional and civil rights of the citizens of the city and county of San Francisco. Their right to access public records, their rights to make public comment in open session. But look what you do. You have these meetings last year with the Ethics Commission, and you go round and round in circles about how they're going to enforce your rules, and here we are right back again in the same situation where Mr. St. Croix is undercutting what you do. So how many years is it going to take before you go around in circles and around in circles and around in circles and say, oh, we're still where we are? You spent the last 4 years making amendments to the law, and I see it's on the agenda today. You're going to make more amendments to the law. Although you haven't done anything, as far as I can see, to make any effort to actually get it on the ballot. Do you realistically think that anybody on the Board of Supervisors is going to give you more power when they don't support you in what you have? They don't provide you with a staff. The city attorney isn't your friend. I think if you have any idea that the city attorney's office supports what you do here or what you're here to do, you have to have your head examined. The city attorney does not want open government. He wants to keep it closed. He wants to make sure that nobody gets to say things that he doesn't want said. He wants to make sure that if I make a comment and I want to put that 150-word statement in the minute so that it accurately reflects that government-produced document, accurately reflects what I say, they will deny that. They will substitute in its place their interpretation of what I said, which is nothing like what I said. And when I say you're censoring me, they go, oh, no, we're not. And I watch citizen after citizen walk in here, and you put such a high bar, it's amazing that anybody gets a determination out of you. It took me 4 years to learn all the hoops I had to jump through to finally get the few determinations I've managed to get against the police commission and the library commission and so forth. The regular citizen, they haven't got a hope.
Thank you. Is there further public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Mr. Clerk, could you call the next item, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the next item is consideration of amendments to the Sunshine Ordinance.
Okay. Please recall. Public comment is closed, sir. The task force is not required to respond to your queries. The task force is not required to respond to queries from members of the audience during general public comment. The task force.
My 3 cases that were before. You said it's 5 o'clock, so I thought you were putting them aside, and then you were going to come back to it and let me know what the decision was. You know, so that you take public comment, and now you're moving on to the next agenda item. So that's my confusion.
Well, Mr. Garza,
No,
the
there
task
was no-
on your three complaints, the task force did vote to find violation of 67.25, which is timely response to immediate disclosure requests. Okay, and the matter now goes to the Education, Outreach, and Training Committee.
And when I get there and I'm not supplied with everything correctly, then what?
Mr. Garza, let me point out to you that we could not find that the documents that you requested are required to be requested under Sunshine.
Sir, that would have to be believable if your premise was that under the master contract, they didn't have to go with Sunshine. You didn't see that master contract. You just assumed that. So your allegation is a mere premise.
Okay, let me suggest something to you then, Mr. Garza.
And if they don't have to supply this, they don't have to supply the main contract.
Mr. Garza, let me just say, if a complainant wishes, or a respondent wishes to bring additional evidence after a matter is already concluded, which this matter now has been, okay? If a complainant wishes to, if you wish to provide additional evidence, which a master contract would be, because we haven't seen it, okay? If you wish to go after the master contract.
Why should they have to provide it if they don't have to provide these things per 12L? How are you giving me a solid, viable option? I can't sunshine them for that because of your inadequate ruling right now without verifying their contract, because of your inane assumption. Thank you for another disservice. Amazing. Now, we
Mr.
still haven't
Garza?
addressed 1,000.
Mr. Garza, please be
71.
seated.
I will continue, sir.
Okay, we are now on item number 8, consideration of amendments to the Sunshine Ordinance. Members will recall that at the last meeting, we identified about 11 items that we thought were the most important to deal with in the ordinance, that needed, 11 issues that really needed addressing, and that we felt amending the ordinance could do so. That leaves us with 4 more, which I have outlined I've outlined them all on packet pages 70 through 73. And I have also, prior to that, taken down what I thought were, I believe we all were supposed to, in addition to identifying what we felt the issues were, we were to suggest language in the ordinance that could remedy the issue. On page 73, and we all agreed, we all did reach consensus on the first 6 items. So this takes us to item 7, electronic document storage, and members Wolf and Costa at our last meeting agreed to draft language for an ordinance amendment, and I'm wondering if they've been able to do so.
Not ready.
Not ready. Mr. Costa? Member Costa?
I will agree with Member Wolf.
Okay. Then let us move to item number 8, whether the task force should be authorized to hire outside counsel. I believe there was an amendment proposed earlier. And the question, what we had proposed earlier was to authorize the task force to spend up to $50,000 a year on outside legal help in case we disagreed with an interpretation of law by the city attorney, particularly if an entity, a respondent to a complaint, was using city attorney's advice to bar somebody from what we felt was a public meeting, or fail to provide what we feel was a disclosable public record, then there is a feeling on a number of people that we should have the authority to hire outside legal help and go after an entity that we felt was using city attorney shield to violate the ordinance. Now, there is some question as to whether one city entity, which we are, can sue another. And I remember when this first came up, our administrator clerk at the time was Donna Hall, and she vociferously objected to that particular suggestion, that we could do that. I have informally contacted a number of outside attorneys, and one of them said it's never been done, but federal entities, federal agencies do each other all the time. So is there really anything to bar this if we decided to do it? So that's where we are. I remember Monek, you had a comment? Okay. Where do we stand on this? Do we want to bring in that authorization? Member Snyder.
I just have a question. I have not been involved in this process. This is my first real, involvement in it, because when I started on the task force, this had been tabled for a while. And so I'm just wondering if there has been any discussion about or if there's any precedent for funding a city entity to hire outside counsel. Do other city agencies do that? Do we know if there's any kind of an established process for doing that?
The only one that I'm aware of is the Ethics Commission, but they do use the city attorney's help, but they also have their own attorneys to conduct investigations, and they're they also have a revenue stream because they collect fines from people who have violated the political openness laws, campaign reporting violations and such. So they have a revenue stream. And what I think is envisioned is if we file a lawsuit against a city entity, and we are successful in that lawsuit, then the money that we would collect from the general fund would go back into paying for that attorney, that outside attorney, and that would go back. It would set up a $50,000 fund, a special $50,000 fund for hiring an outside attorney on a case-by-case basis. And if we get a judgment that would include the awarding of our legal fees, then that money would go back into that $50,000 fund.
Mm. So the initial funding for the $50,000 the taxpayers in approving these amendments would say we're going to set aside, the city shall set aside $50,000 for this specific purpose.
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Do we have authority to hire a pro bono counsel? Because there's a bunch of firms, including mine, that do fairly routinely pro bono access work, and I wonder, setting aside the question of money, are we authorized? Is the task force capable of going and hiring somebody on a pro bono basis?
I think Mr. Threet could probably answer that best, but I'm not sure there's anything to proscribe it.
Yeah,
and I think that's
that's
an equally valid question. Member Wolf.
Yeah, the ordinance does provide the ability of the task force to obtain counsel from any department that can provide adequate service in the city first, and there beyond from anybody else. The problem with going outside is then the contracting part of it, because they're not part of the city budget at that point. So it's a little more difficult unless we have a conflicting issue with the city and it demands having an external counsel to, so there's no, the city can't sue itself kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that would seem to be something that the courts would have to, or that would be an argument that the city attorney would make in defending whatever agency the task force sued. I assume they would make the argument, you can't do that.
The ordinance lays it out for us already.
Yeah.
The court would just agree with the ordinance.
Yeah.
So, but it doesn't preclude us from saying, well, city attorney, it just isn't working. but maybe we can go to legislative analyst's office, or we can go to public defender, or we can go to district attorney.
Well, my question is about private law firms.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but the ordinance seems to, if there's any prescription, to go within the city family first, and then if there, if there is a conflict, then outside.
I mean,
Now, the one other thing that we do need to consider in deciding whether to try to include that particular amendment, and that is the political aspect. There are some things that we are proposing that I think wouldn't really draw that much objection, but something like this, I think that would draw very vociferous opponents, powerful opponents, out of the woodwork. And so the question is, if we include this, would that kill the entire package politically? And do we want it to bring this in when we have all these other proposed amendments in here? That's another thing we have to decide. Member Johnson?
I wouldn't vote for it with it in there if I didn't know anything about it. So I agree with you. Just want to put that in there.
Member Costa?
I'm wondering what specifically about it would turn you off?
Through the chair, spending more money on the budget. I also was opposed to the school board getting money right now, just because, or anybody. And so if I was a voter, I would not support something that might end up costing the city more money if I was unaware of, just as an average voter. As someone who knows a little bit more about it, I can understand why we want to include it. But I also don't think that you would, you might be able to get the signatures if you're out there signing, because the voters might not necessarily see that, but I don't think you would get the supervisors.
No, and assuming for a minute that even if we got it on the ballot, there would be, in this case, I think the kind of opposition that we didn't have for Prop G in 1999, it would come out this time.
And also the mayor, the people running for mayor.
And
get it.
And the supervisors and the city attorney and you name it. They'd be out there, and this time I think they might actually be throwing money at an opposition, which didn't happen last time. Member Wolf.
Just to finish off the Member Snyder's question, the reference is in 6730A in the last two sentences. I think it's worthwhile for me to reiterate them. The city attorney shall serve as legal advisor to the task force. The task force shall, at its request, have assigned to it an attorney from within the city attorney's office or other appropriate city office who has experience in public access law matters. This attorney shall serve solely as a legal advisor and advocate to the task force, and I'll repeat that, advocate to the task force, and an ethical wall shall be maintained between the work of this attorney on behalf of the task force and any person or office that the task force determines may have a conflict of interest with regards to matters that is being handled by the attorney. So it offers us quite a bit of latitude. Doesn't provide us, though, with external. But there are other areas where it discusses the city attorney may represent city employees in sunshine matters in court. Okay, and if the Sunshine Task Force is on the other side of it, then most likely we would have to be assigned our own attorneys.
So one option, and take this for what it's worth, because I'm thinking of this now. It's not something I put a lot of thought into, but I mean, one option would be to propose or to include in the amendment a provision that would allow the task force to hire, kind of in quotation marks, pro bono counsel, but would not provide for a fund necessarily. That would still cost the city in the sense that, and there is a sort of a strange cognitive dissonance because it would be the city suing itself, and it would cost the city in the sense that they would have to, the city attorney's office would have to defend the lawsuit, but we wouldn't be paying, or the taxpayers would not be paying for a lawyer to sue the city. You know, and on access cases in a lot, at federal, state, and local level, the ordinances provide for fees to be recovered for the prevailing party, and so there's a decent likelihood that if the task force prevailed, they would get fees for it.
Okay,
Just an idea.
How about if we say obtain the services of pro bono outside counsel?
Something like that. I mean, I suggest it just because it might be more palatable politically. But maybe that's an item for discussion, whether it actually would be. I don't know.
Mr. Chair?
Member Wolf?
The only concern I have about that is I think we should leave the language as it is, but make it that the task force, if offered pro bono, may accept it. But don't remove the opportunity to be able to receive funding or to be able to collect funding and create a fund for such things for the future, where things become more and more litigious, more and more detailed and specific, to various interpretations that may require an expense. There may be a time where we might not be able to find pro bono. I mean, I appreciate the offer today, but tomorrow that we've never been offered that.
Might not be able to, I don't know.
So I would just say that I would just make the addition that if pro bono services are offered, that task force may accept that as an addition, but I wouldn't change what's already been offered. Nothing's for free.
Okay. Again, while I like that in principle, again, I think that we have to consider the politics of that as well. By including that, we could kill the entire amendments package.
Well, I don't know that. We haven't done a poll. We haven't presented it to anybody. We don't know. We haven't felt anybody out on the item. I'm pretty involved in the political circles. I don't know that would be untenable. $50,000 is, it really is a drop.
It's a drop in the bucket.
In the bucket. And the question of whether we would actually even get the money is questionable anyway. So I think that whether it's in there, it's not going to be one of the items that's going to make or break it. I think the areas of enforcement is going to be more untenable for folks rather than this particular item. I think, our reports to the Board of Supervisors are pretty clear about, how what's going on and what our experiences are with the city attorneys, with the attorneys that have been assigned to us by a city attorney's office, which actually is against the ordinance. We should be choosing our own attorney from the city attorney's office, so that I don't think that that's a big make or break. It's not the first make or break, I should say, not the primary. There are other items that are much more, will be much more untenable for supervisors.
Okay, I think this would be a good time for public comment on this particular matter. Is there public comment on the question of whether the task force should be authorized to hire outside counsel?
Thomas Piccarello? I think the task force does need the ability to hire outside counsel when there's a conflict of interest. For example, when the respondent is the city attorney's office. Or, what is your process now? Who do you rely on for legal advice when the city attorney is the respondent? Or if there's a complaint regarding a closed session held by the city attorney, who do you rely on for legal advice? So you clearly need a provision to hire outside counsel. It's my understanding that one of the other amendments you're going to have is to levy fees and penalties for violations of sunshine. That could be used as a revolving fund to pay for the outside counsel. But the discussion about collecting legal fees, though, generally, unless there's a contractual provision, the winning party doesn't collect fees on a tort. The fees are borne both sides. You don't collect attorney fees on a tort case. They have to be contractual. So if one of the amendments is going to be that you're going to assess fees and penalties, you could use that as a revolving fund to pay your outside counsel. But clearly, the way your system is set up now, you have no legal counsel when the respondent is a city attorney. So there has to be some kind of provision for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment on this item? Sub-item.
Members of the task force, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. I first want to apologize to the two newer members. You haven't gotten used to me. Member Monet and Member Johnson probably have just about gotten to that point, but the rest of you, I think you know what's coming. This is such an unrealistic conversation that you think that the city government is actually going to give you $50,000 to sue it. They won't even support you. You send stuff to the Board of Supervisors, they won't enforce it. You send it to the Ethics Commission, they won't enforce it. And you really think they're going to give you $50,000. Now maybe 6 or 8 years ago when we had a very progressive board and the city was flush with cash, you might have had some snowball's chance in hell of getting this through. Today, ain't no way. And a drop in the bucket, that would be the perfect excuse. We cannot afford to give you this money. And number two, City Attorney Dennis Herrera, do you really honestly think if he gets into the mayor's office, he is in a way, shape, manner, or form allow you to sue anybody? Look at Mr. Piccarello's comment. I mean, you have been represented by Ernie Laurenti and Mr. Threet, and I have a lot of respect for Mr. Threet, Ernie Laurenti not so much, but basically those two gentlemen know which side of the bread their butter is on. They are evaluated by the city attorney's office. They are hired and retained by the city's attorney's office, and they know damn well what the city attorney's office is in his impression and attitude toward this body. And they know darn well that if they were ever to do anything to actively support what you do, that would be the end of them in the city attorney's office. They would be, I don't know what kind of place they could send them to, which would be even worse than this. I sometimes think this is the outer circle of hell as far as the city attorney's office sending deputy city attorneys to be recommending. And I have to agree in this particular case with Mr. Nee in the fact that politically there is no chance in hell that this Board of Supervisors is going to let this happen. And if you really honestly think that they will, I think you really need some Xanax or some, some sort of a mood elevator or something.
Thank you. Is there further public comment on this item? I just want to comment on what Mr. Hartz just said. And that is the process, if we decide, if we can do it on time, of getting this on the ballot, using the board. We would not take this to the full board and say, vote this up. That's not what we plan to do. What we plan to do is go to the 4 supervisors, maybe 5, who we think are the most sunshine friendly, and we know pretty much who they are, and say, would you sign off on this to get it on the ballot? That's our plan. And again, if it gets on the ballot, and this particular provision is included, I think we're going to see a lot of opposition come out of the woodwork, well-funded opposition that didn't emerge in 1999 for Prop G. That's my own guess. So what I'd like to do now is just see if there's a consensus one way or the other for including an amendment, including this particular amendment in our package. Member Cawthon?
I just wanted to make a general comment that proceeds somewhat from what Mr. Hart says. I gather from what you say we're trying to get it on the November ballot. And last time, only 2 of the supervisors supported us, only Amiano and Yee. Newsom and the guy who's now up in Sacramento, Leno. Voted that they were negative, but everybody else voted no, including Sue Bierman. So I think it's unrealistic. This particular board is much more, quote, moderate than either of these 2 boards that I'm talking about. So I think it's really unrealistic to think even that we could get, is it 5 we need?
4.
Put it on the 4. Yeah, I know we could get 3. I don't know about the 4th. So I'm thinking that what we did last time is we went directly to the voters with it. Of course, we had to collect signatures, and I think Bruce Brugman helped with the financing. But I think we have to be realistic. I mean, we've worked on this so long, and I agree with Chair Nee that something like $50,000 for outside counsel might be a red flag. So we have to be real careful.
Member Wolf?
You know, Mr. Chair, the thing is, you know, I've run dozens of political campaigns, including my own twice, citywide. I got to tell you, you got to have a political strategy, and if you're going to walk in with you chopping everything down to what you want, they're going to chop you down some more. And if you think that that's not going to happen, you're kidding yourself. Everybody's kidding themselves. So you have to go in there with the ultimate, the penultimate of what you want. And then you have a negotiation. And you were talking about bringing this forward to 4 or 5 supervisors. Every one of them is going to have a different something to say about it, okay? You can't go in there with everything being exactly what you want. That would be, to me, naive. So I would suggest that all the amendments that we want to be strong, that we want as the ultimate, the penultimate of what exactly we want, that's what we approve. And then we shop it around. Because that's all we're doing here. We're presenting a proposal. That's what it's going to be presented as to all these people. And if that is not going to be the will of this task force, then I would say stop. Don't do it. Just leave it the way it is. Because that would be a real disservice. It would be very difficult for me and to go around and shop it around if it was only going to be exactly what we want in the end. We need to start out with the universe and end up at the treetops. I don't want to be driven down into the roots and get less than what we're asking for.
Member Snyder?
So what would be I just want to make sure that I understand how feasible it would be to shave things off or remove things if it became clear that it wasn't politically feasible to get this through. We shop it to several members of the Board of Supervisors. They say, it's fantastic except for this outside counsel thing. That just kills the deal for me. Can we then what would it take for us to remove that from the proposal? Would it have to come back to the full task force, get a full vote, and then go back? I mean, is that process?
I can make a suggestion on that.
Member Wolf?
So the way you go about doing this is you make 2 or 3 alternatives, the one that you really want, and then 2 that you can bargain with. And you authorize whoever is going to be shopping it around to work towards getting the primary, the number 1 choice. And if they're unable, and if it seems like they're unable, and give them the freedom to be able to negotiate, but based within the confines of other alternatives. And that's the way they going to have that. I agree with you, to have it keep coming back and forth, unless the task force wants to have that kind of negotiations. The problem is that we're talking about this in public. And most campaigns, you would never, ever talk about your political strategy in public like this. So that becomes again, a little untenable. So I would suggest that if we're going to go about it in this way, and we're going to be totally public about it, then we come up with 2 or 3 other alternatives. That we have to figure out how we're planning on going to shop this around. I think that should be left up to a smaller a group, ad hoc committee of 2 or 3 or 4 to be able to determine what that strategy should be, and be able to shop it around. There are ways to do this. You don't necessarily have to bring it to all 4 all at once. You could bring it to 1 and say, hey, give me your temperature on this. You know, what do you think about this? You know, I mean, there are many different ways to do this. And I think we shouldn't be just, trying to think logically and try to interpret or guess or conjecture what supervisors might think or not be thinking. Depending upon what happens at the board tomorrow, some supervisors may say, you know what, I want everything to be open. I want everything sunshine. I don't care, Or they may say, you know what, shut down the city, shut everything down. Don't let any information out. You don't know what's going to happen day to day anymore. Everything is all upside down, inside out, and topsy-turvy. So I would just suggest making enough alternatives for what we think may be sticky points, and giving enough latitude to an ad hoc committee that's going to be shopping this around.
I agree. I think what we should do is figure out, first of all, what's the ultimate that we want, as Member Wolf says, and then figure out which of these we're willing to compromise on. And then figure out who best to approach which supervisors on this. And in response to Member Snyder's question, does it then have to come back to the task force? No, because once we assign it, then it's the supervisors who are going to put this on the ballot if they decide to do it. And if they don't, then we just hope that a citizens committee will come forth to collect signatures. Maybe not this year, but maybe next. Member Wolf?
Yeah, I would just further say that even before shopping it around to supervisors, there are plenty in our political circles that know the behavior, the attitude, like a plane, of the supervisors and what they may or may not do on certain points. And considering we're taking this in a very public kind of way, it's no problem to present it to them. It wouldn't be ex parte or anything like that. They could pull it off the internet or whatever out of the minutes and read it, and any one of us can have those, kind of get an idea, or they can present some ideas to us of what they feel before we actually even shop it around. And that might be even a better way to go about it. Again, we need a campaign plan. We need a strategic plan.
Okay, so I think at this point there is consensus for including the item 8 provision here. Is that correct?
Yeah, so long as there's a process for potentially bargaining it away if necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That takes us to item 9, contract preparatory requests and responses. By this we mean things like requests for bids, requests for proposal, requests for quotation, requests for qualifications. Specifically, what types of requests and responses are covered, and when should they become disclosable? Now, this goes to, I think, item, if I recall correctly, 67.24.
E. Contracts, bid, and proposals.
That's correct. And there has been, particularly with some recent cases brought before us, there have been some recognitions that the law is what it is, and that they really knew, the complainants really knew that that they were at a disadvantage here, legally at a disadvantage, but they wanted to bring it to our attention so that we could revisit that particular provision in the ordinance. Now, the other aspect of this is that the bidding process is competitive, or at least it should be. And so if if certain types of documents become disclosable too early in the bidding process, then it kind of kills the competitive aspect of it. And that's what I think the people, when the original ordinance was drafted, and also when Prop G was drafted, I think that was certainly a consideration, and I think that's why the current language is as it is. Do we want to revise 6724E in any way? That becomes our question. What types of requests and responses are covered, and when should they become disclosable? Current law, they become disclosable after the contract is awarded, not until then. Member Johnson.
You know, this is kind of a tough one because I think that what we saw in the Stowe Lake case is not necessarily that there is when it should become disclosable. It's that the Rec and Park has gone rogue on everyone, and the board doesn't even get to approve their. You know, they don't have any involvement in the process of these bids, and so when Rec and Park appeared before us, they implied that RFQs and RFPs were the exact same thing. But when the Stowe family really pushed for it, we saw that Nick Kinsey himself had written that the RFPs were not working, so he switched to an RFQ. But Rec and Park is offering that they're the same, and they use them interchangeably. And so does, and the city's blurred the lines between those two, although the redevelopment agency has not. They might not be around. So the problem is going to be, the problem to me in the wording now of the ordinance is that the wording assumes an RFQ precedes an RFP, but they no longer follow that standard.
So do we want to amend the language somehow? And if so, how?
Mr. Chair?
Member Wolf.
I would just say that, you know, part of dealing with the RFP process is there are confines with regards to the administrative code. And there are also best practices in business that, you know, there are requirements. So I think what we need to identify are the different parts. I think that the ordinance already speaks to those parts. It doesn't speak of an RFQ, but it doesn't actually outline what is inclusive of RFP and what is exclusive of RFP. And I think that's something that the administrative code speaks to. Now, I've done some research on this, and it's very complicated. And there are 3 administrative code sections that are focused on this particular issue. But in the ordinance itself, under 6724E3, and then 3 I's, Roman numeral small, lowercase, Roman numeral I's, it speaks to franchise agreements. Now there's a lot more openness about what they need to provide. And that also is franchise agreements most of the time are competitive processes. But there it talks about all documents exchanged related to the position of parties, including draft contracts, shall be made available for public inspection and copying upon request. That goes beyond what RFP provides. RFP is a little more confined and closed because they want to make sure that it's as competitive as possible. So I don't know if we can glean something from that particular that particular section or paragraph to apply. I mean, even the ones before that is leases or permits having a total anticipated revenue or expense of $500,000 or more, or having a term of 10 years or more. You know, take for instance the Stowe Lake thing, if it was a 10-year, 11-year contract, then, you know, then everything has to be open. I'm just thinking in this particular sense, it may be better to speak to somebody in the contracts department just to get an overview of what, you know, whether they think what our experience of what Rec and Park did was correct or not. My discussions with them is no. What they did was absolutely incorrect. But they don't have the manpower to be able to look at every single contract because there are hundreds of contracts going on all at the same time.
Okay, you're talking about the Office of Contract Administration?
Yes.
That's correct? Okay.
Yes.
Member Wolf, would you be willing to do that?
I can continue with that.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll do my best to try and be timely. It's a little difficult right now, but I will do my best to be
I think it's difficult
timely as I can.
Difficult for all of us. So
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. Member Johnson?
At a minimum, we at least have to include RFQ in here in some way, because I feel like we're going to get more.
And when you say RFQ, do you mean request for qualifications or request?
The actual. Sorry.
Request for qualifications or request for quote?
The city does not use the term request for quote, and when you ask them about it, they will not respond in any other way than it doesn't exist. So
Okay.
there's no point.
So it's request for qualification.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I sent out a bunch of emails before when we were doing the Stowe Lake, trying to find out information about it, and that's, that's how I came, to really bear down on Mr. Kinsey for telling us they were the same, but in his own writing saying they were different. But I think you're going to see that with more frequency. So when it comes before us, there's this muddling. And my concern is not so much what we want in this one, but similar to the things that are happening with the Ethics Commission, where they take the black letter law and regurgitate it out in a way just like they did to the item 1.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly how to do it. Unfortunately, I left in my haste, I left my notes from last time at work. But at a minimum, I think we should at least include somehow request for qualification in there. So when it comes up again, it's not this idea. Because remember, we spent a significant amount of time arguing with them about what was what. And it's because they're using them interchangeably dependent upon the project.
Okay, so in 6724E1, we would add responses to requests for proposals, comma, requests for qualifications, and all other records of communications. Is that your suggestion?
Well, no, I mean, I'd have to look at it further because there's some rules that you can't just throw in there because the two of them have separate rules. So we would have to, you know, at our last meeting, we were not sure whether we were going to use our old changes or make the new changes. So we would have to learn a little bit more from what Member Wolf is researching, because you know, the proposals are supposed to keep the proprietary information private until the bid has been made. But the request for some of this language, when I say that it assumes one precedes the other, some of this language in here, like when it talks about the names of scorers and graders, or when that certain documents are turned over when the RFP evaluation is over, that is where that RFP gets muddled, and I think it's by intent through Rec and Park. So it would require some review of the municipal code too.
Okay.
So it might have to piggyback on your contract
What
work.
perhaps a good way to approach this would be for Member Wolf to continue his research into this. Perhaps you'd like to join him in that, and then the two of you come up with some a suggestion for alternative language in 6724E1. Is that agreeable?
Yeah.
Okay. Task force. That's agreeable. Okay. Why don't we take public comment on this, please?
Members of the task force, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government, and this one is even more touchy than the previous. I mean, we're talking, technically in that sense, a drop in the bucket, $50,000. Now you're talking about the millions and millions of dollars that the city spends every single year giving out contracts. Now, there are some really valid reasons for keeping contract information confidential until some point in time. If the city is trying to get the maximum amount of service for the best possible dollar, then you don't want to put out the information necessarily, because you might find that the person who bid lowest was $3 million under the next highest bidder, and if that person gets that information, they go, I could up this another $1.5 million, $2 million and still win. So there are some valid reasons. Unfortunately, I think what you ran into with Park and Rec was a simple way. We want to get around anybody finding out what we're doing. And we're going to find a way, even what you do, no matter what you do, there's no perfect answer, because they are going to look and find another way to get around exposing information, because unfortunately, government involves a lot of money, and it involves a lot of personal contact, and sometimes contracts are not given to the person best qualified or the best price, but are given to someone who knows someone. And when those sorts of things happen, that is what they want to be held. I'll give you an example that happened in this last election about Kamala Harris, a case that came before you, and they were asking for information about her campaign finances. And it was like, well, if you really want to go get an attorney, because there's nothing we can do to get, but basically it was just a delaying tactic to give them time to get it in place so that it was too late to actually do anything. And that's what some of these situations are. They want to just keep it dragging to the point where they've actually got a contract in place, and by that time it's a done deal, and you going back and try to change anything isn't going to happen. But again, this is a very touchy area because of the millions and millions and millions of dollars that are given out every year. I'll give you one example that occurred to me recently. I was in a case before the Rent Stabilization Arbitration Board, and the other 32 residents of my building and I were represented by a lawyer from the Tenderloin Housing Clinic. Only after the case was over did we find out he was being paid by the rent board. And he was being paid by the rent board to specifically deal with a certain type of issue, which was pass-through exemptions. And although I had repeatedly asked him over and over, you are going to fight this on the merits because I didn't qualify for the pass-through, he said yes. And then what he did was he sat in the hearing and said nothing. And basically what you have in that case is collusion. They want to come to an outcome that the law doesn't allow, and so what they do is they hire an attorney. You think you've got somebody representing you, but he's actually working for them.
Right.
Thank you. Is there further public comment on the question of contract preparatory requests and responses?
I wanted to ask what you're doing with respect to this item, and are you taking general, or are you only going on specific things? Because the item itself is a very general item regarding your taking up of public, of amendments. So I just
Well,
wanted to ask how you were, where you are.
What we're really doing, I think, is looking specifically at the item, at the language of 67.24E1, and deciding what, if any, changes we want to make in that, bearing in mind the recent complaints that have come before us regarding the Stow Lake concession and the awarding of that contract, also bearing in mind that there are competitive considerations in this entire bidding process that need to be recognized. And I don't know if you were here a few minutes ago. Members Wolf and Johnson have agreed to talk with the Office of Contract Administration, get some input from them, and do what other additional research they feel will be helpful and relevant, and then they will work together on drafting some alternative language.
Thanks for the update. I did want to make some general, will I have a chance in the next few minutes to make a general comment about the general item as it's posted? Basically, I've said some of these things before. Many of the members here are new, and I wanted to make a comment in general about amendments to the Sunshine Ordinance as it's posted on the agenda.
Okay, why don't we, at the end of this whole thing, I will allow you, I think it's a good idea to allow you to make some general comments, and we will call for general
Okay,
comments from
yeah.
other members of the audience as well. I think that's fair.
I appreciate it. I can't stay, though, so if you'd like to take it basically sooner, that's great. Otherwise, I will leave and come another time.
Okay, why don't you give them to us now then?
Really briefly, since there wasn't anything listed on the public comment section as an explanatory document, I just wanted to say some things that I've said before, and that is that I think it would be very valuable for you to do a couple of things with respect to how you proceed here. Number one, I think that you might want to go and solicit from folks who have had contact with Sunshine in one form or another, whether it's been filing complaints or not filing complaints, but particularly anybody who has approached the task force, and solicit from them what's working and what's not working for you. What do you think is working well with the ordinance? What's not working well? There are, to my mind, the procedure that you have done in the past it's okay as far as it goes, taking one section at a time, bit by bit by bit. But there may be folks who have, all they know is, I'm getting hassled when I try and get a public document. I don't know what section specifically is being violated, but I know that is a problem. And so I think it would be valuable if you would allow lay people to describe in lay terms what kinds of issues and problems they're having, without respect to what specific shred and portion of the legislation they might be referring to, which they may not themselves know. There may also be people with problems that are not addressed by existing portions of the legislation, and that too would give them a chance to comment in general about what's working and what's not working. For example, somebody may say there's no enforcement. That's certainly a problem that you've dealt with previously. Now, does that refer to enforcement of this particular section or that particular section? There may just be an issue. I don't know which section is related, but getting a document, being heard in public comment, whatever it is, an ordinary person might say that's been a problem. You can figure out what section that applies to or what sections that applies to, and I think that's appropriate for you to do, to let them just speak. And again, I would urge you to solicit the public on what it is that has worked for them and not worked. As I said, there are people who've had experiences with Sunshine, and it would be useful to hear from them. Thanks.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to go back to taking public comment on item number 9 with sub-item number 9 here. Is there further public comment? Okay, seeing none, public comment on that is closed, and I think we have reached consensus as to the next step in this particular item. Is that correct? Okay. Member Johnson.
And I was not, I apologize for bringing this up now because I was late, but I don't know, in the beginning on issue 1 about changing the task force name to commission, did you include that or take it out?
Well, I thought I included it. Let me see.
The only thing that, just quickly, I wanted to point out that.
Oh, item number 1. Yeah, there was consensus that we were going to do it.
Okay, I just wanted to point out, I was showing Member Wolf, you know, I'm always kind of perusing this for my other nonsense, but there's a place in the ordinance where they actually refer to us as a commission, 6730E. I don't know if it's a mistake or it says the task force commission. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. Okay. We'll note that. Thank you for bringing that up. Since we are proposing to change our name to a commission, then the package that would go to the voters would obviously include every single provision, every single section of the ordinance and subsection where the name task force appears. So certainly 6730C would then fall under that. Okay, number 10. Record withholding justification. Need to tighten requirements for respondents to public record requests to define clearly and specifically the provision or provisions in statutory or case law in which they base denial of access. That would go, I think, to, what, 67.26, 67.27, is that right? $67.27 justification of withholding. What needs to be I mean, to me, maybe I'm missing something, but to me, 67.27 is fairly thorough. But obviously, somebody felt it wasn't. Member Johnson, Member Johnson.
I don't remember, this is not my suggestion, and I can't recall, like I said, I don't have my notes exactly who brought this forth, but does it have something to do with what Mr. Grossman had been talking about how we kind of we lean toward the idea that the complainant has to prove that the document is disclosable, and Mr. Grossman's suggestion was that all the documents are public and that the person holding the document has to prove the exemption as opposed to proving that it's public. And this justification of withholding language, perhaps if we added something in there that, you know, there's a presumption of disclosability, therefore you must justify withholding, something like that. Attorneys, please.
Yeah, I remember Mr. Grossman talking about that, but I remember it in the context of, and it just escaped me. It wasn't this context.
It was voting. It was our motions.
Was it?
But, you know, you wanted us to reframe the
Oh, yeah, it was
motions.
the majority rule issue. It was where it's the rule about what constitutes a majority for the task force. And his idea was that records are presumptively open, and so we're not actually deciding. I don't remember all the steps, but that's the context in which this came up. I don't
It's
see.
that he says that he wants us to make motions saying, is it justified? Is there reasoning
Right.
justified, as opposed to,
the burden to be shifted onto the respondent rather than onto the. But I don't see that. I think that's sort of a separate issue. I'm not sure that there's anything we can do in the justification for withholding that would really alter the presumption or the burden that's on the respondent. All the 6727 does, and by all that I don't mean to make it less significant, but it provides that anybody withholding, any respondent or agency that is going to withhold records has to tell you why they're withholding it. And I could look at this more carefully and see if there's a better way to phrase any of this, but just in the times that I've looked at it and looking at it now, I don't see immediately any way to improve it. Maybe because I don't understand what the problem with it, or what the perceived problem with it was. I don't know.
I think another thing we might bear in mind is Prop 59, Article 1, Section 3 of the state constitution. When that became law, that, I think, did constitute a shifting of the burden of proof on that. Member Wolf?
Yeah, the other issue that came up was around redaction. We were the ones that had to determine whether things could, should, would be, or were correctly redacted, and the burden of proof should be on the respondent, so that we can then challenge, either accept or challenge, or research and research their claim. Mm-hmm. If they cite some wrong area of the law, hey, sorry, doesn't apply. You need to unredact and provide the information. And I think a lot of that came with a case several years ago of a guy who had some water mechanics in his backyard that he didn't know about. And then all of a sudden some people show up in his backyard and start doing work. They wouldn't let him know what was going on. They declared it was Homeland Security, that they couldn't reveal the water system. Eventually they did give him the information because it was absolutely public information, but they held off as long as they could. So there are issues around that. They redacted a whole bunch of stuff, like couldn't show you a map, or the map was black, or whatever, it was all blacked out. But that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's important. This is really important. We end up having to do a ton of work to try and figure out, we can determine what is public and what is not public, but the burden of proof is on, why are you withholding this information? You need to make that case. It's not a plaintiff-defendant thing. Don't think about that. Because if you do it in that way, then the defendant does not have to respond to anything. This is a respondent. They must explain their actions. Really, the respondent is the plaintiff, if you look at it in kind of the correct way, and the defendant is actually the complainant.
Well, but in the civil context, the defendant does have to. In the criminal context, the defendant never has to speak. But in a civil context, if you don't respond, you get a default judgment.
Okay.
So it's a little more similar to the civil context.
Then that's the way we should
that's
hold
an interesting
that
idea.
framework as in our thoughts with this.
Yeah. I hear you, and I think I agree with you on all the burden stuff. I just don't know that anything that 6727 specifically really speaks to any of that. I don't know. It might.
Well, we're looking to amend it, to add, to make it more stronger, to make it to make them prove it before, so that way we can either accept it or challenge it. Because if they withheld under the wrong section of the ordinance, or they were advised, or they read the good government guide incorrectly, or something like that, they need to actually give the reason as why. They can't just have a blanket, a blanket authority, and then it's up to us to determine whether it is or isn't. It's too much work for us, and sometimes we're wrong. Hopefully, most times we're right.
So there is, I think, consensus to rewrite 6727?
I don't see. I mean, it seems pretty clear to me that any withholding shall be justified as follows.
In writing.
In writing, as follows.
Yeah.
And, that seems pretty clear to me, that the burden is on the respondent. If they're going to withhold, they have to explain why. And A says withholding under the CPRA or elsewhere has to be cited, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't know.
I think among all of those, I think pretty much everything is covered. Maybe I'm missing something, but that's my impression. Member Costa.
The one thing that I can think of, and I haven't thought through the exact wording, but would be to add a sentence just at the very beginning, sort of clarifying this sentiment that, public documents are public, and therefore any withholding of information shall be justified. Sort of I don't know, establishing this idea that the burden is on justifying, not necessarily adding a new, section or modifying any of them.
Can I ask? Can I pose a question or a premise? We have a case. A respondent comes in. They are refusing to produce public documents, and they don't cite the authority. Okay, are they automatically then in violation of 6727?
Yeah, we've
Yes.
done that. We've done that.
Absolutely.
We have.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember cases where we've done that, where we said you violated it because you didn't tell us why. Just the fact that you didn't tell us what the justification is.
But that actually, in every case that I've sat here when there's a withholding of public information and there's a refusal, that doesn't always come up, and it's never asked.
Well, that's
specifically.
That's oversight maybe on our part, but
But
we've done it, and we've also
Okay.
done it where I think we've had cases where part of the withholdings were justified, but they were wrong. That the statute didn't support their withholding, and that's actually one of the reasons that this section's there, is so that if they have a reason, that if the agency has a reason that it wants to withhold, that has to be held up to scrutiny, and so they have to say why it's being withheld. And we've had cases, I can't remember specifically which ones, but cases where the justification just didn't bear out, and so we couldn't find them in violation, I guess, for withholding for not citing something, but what they cited was just wrong.
Well, so I'm thinking of a scenario, okay? So that happens, we find in favor of the complainant, goes to compliance and amendments. They show up again, they continue to stonewall giving the information. Then we find them in violation of willful failure, okay? And then it goes to the Ethics Commission. Right?
Yeah.
And so the part that we get stuck with is we don't have the ability to compel them. Okay, and I think that's really kind of the sticking point here on many of these amendments is the ability to compel with the threat of enforcement. Problem is we don't have a real threat of enforcement.
Yeah,
we get foiled on it at every turn. So, and hopefully not in the near future, but you never, in today's world, it's hard for us, to compel it. But basically the only thing we can do is to try to mediate and coax them into providing the information. So I understand the introduction of this. I think it's really more about us being able to, before any question, the first question to be asked is, under what statute are you withholding the documents? Now, sometimes they've done it, they presented HIPAA law or what have you when it comes to health records, you know, and there are big challenges with regards to that. But they hardly ever, very rarely do they cite the CPRA.
I want to just add, in response to Member Costa's comment, in 67.20 definitions, paragraph B, public information shall mean. I think that kind of adds a little bit of force to 67.27.
Which definition again?
67.20B, definition of public records, or public information.
You just pointed out something else that's new.
Member Johnson.
It does, but it doesn't at the same time. I mean, it says that they're all public records, but it doesn't say we're going to presume them.
Well, what you're not presuming whether a record here is public. What you're presuming there is I'm kind of splitting hairs on language here, but everything in the city's bailiwick is a public record. The question isn't whether it's a public record. The question is whether it's disclosable. And
No, the question is not whether it's disclosable. It is disclosable. The presumption means that they're all disclosable.
that's correct. And if
Then they have to.
well,
It's not whether it's public. It's what reason do you have?
well, and that's what 67.27 lays out pretty clearly, as well as Prop 59. Member Wolf, Member Snyder.
So I agree with you on 6727. I don't agree with you on 6720B. 6720B describes what public information is. Doesn't describe what a public record is. Just describes what it just says a public information shall mean the content of a public record. So the focus of that definition is on public the definition of public information, not the definition of a public record. Okay, I think it's got to be something prior to that in the beginning that describes that all documents are public unless shown not to be. Let's see.
Okay, I think though we've kind of come full circle with this, and the bread and butter question here is, do we need to change the language in any way of 6727? Member Snyder?
Yeah, so one thing we could do is, so 67.1 acts as a kind of preamble to the whole thing, to the whole shebang, the Sunshine Ordinance, and it just sets forth the reasons that it's there, and we think that the right of the people to know what their government is doing is an important one. It's fundamental to democracy. You know, there are a lot of very strong policy statements in this 67.1. I haven't analyzed it closely, but we might look to include a sentence or two that talks in strong language about what is presumed to be, that everything is presumed to be public. And Chairman Nee mentioned earlier the Prop 59, which establishes this kind of general presumption. We could borrow some language from Prop 59 and plug it into 67.1, findings and purpose. And that, you know, as I think findings and purpose infuses the whole ordinance with this purpose, as it says. And so to the extent we want to bolster the presumption that records are open, that would seem to me to be the place to do it rather than 6727. And this language may actually be in here. I haven't read this closely, so there may be language in here that says, you know, records are presumed to be open unless shown otherwise.
Member Wolf?
I would just say that in the definitions with regards to public information, it does say that public records are described in the CPRA under 6252. And that is also definitions It says in E, 6252E, public records includes any writing containing information relating to the conduct of the public's business, prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency, regardless of physical form or characteristics. Public records in the custody of or maintained by the governor's office means any writing prepared on or after January 6, 1975. So the definition is there.
Incorporate, and the Sunshine Ordinance
Incorporate, it makes reference to CPRA. So I think one of the problems that we run into here is that there's a lot of references to a different law that is that we're umbrellaed under, and so there's assumptions, and it makes it difficult for the local layperson or the local complainant they just look at the Sunshine Ordinance and may not necessarily look beyond it. The ordinance assumes this, but people may not. And even though it makes the reference, it may not be clear to them that those things apply. Ordinance, I think, was written in a way so that it becomes automatically implied. So you don't have to do that kind of research. But I think for many of the things that we deal with, it's not clear. And I think a lot of members of the public miss things, and we end up knowing what those things are, and so very confusing for them in the end, because they're not sure what we're referring to, or what's assumptive. So that's just my observation.
Do we want to take Member Snyder's suggestion, incorporate some of the Prop 59 language into 67.1? Or do we feel it's necessary or unnecessary? Or do the various provisions in the ordinance itself cover all of it, really? I mean, I think there have, from all the things that have been raised, I'm kind of under that impression, but Member Wolf?
I would just say, maybe it is, because reading through 67.1, it doesn't. It talks about the public's access to workings of the government. It doesn't really talk about, the documents, the records in 67.1. I think it may be worthwhile to add in there, maybe you can even just take the exact language from 6252.
That's another idea.
And then it's just plain, the workings of government includes public, are the public records.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a crack at plugging in the sentence or two from either 6252 or Prop 59 or both. Just,
okay.
Briefly add maybe plug in a subsection of 67.1.
Member Johnson?
I think that I do think that we should add it in there. I'm getting an email right now from the clerk of the board defending what I suggested was David Chu's abuse of the public comment on items. So I think it needs to be crystal clear. No assumptions. No assumptions. I think we need to, it needs to be in there so that the Dennis Herrera has to include it in the city guide, that your documents are going to be presumed disclosable, and you will have to provide a protection for them. It's not a suggestion, it is a demand.
This is from Ms. Calvillo?
No, I'm saying this right now, because this is about open meetings, not documents.
I see.
What I'm saying is that every time somebody comes back at us when we're trying to make a suggestion, it is this tangling of the language, just like in a court. So no assumptions. Even if you can figure it out by putting a puzzle piece together, maybe that works and you can put the puzzle piece together. But I think I would rather have it just lay it out as it is. We will presume these documents are disclosable, and you must provide justification, or they will be disclosed. I just don't think that we can leave room anymore for them to do this finagling with the words. It's jabberwocky.
I mean, it goes back to the whole RFQ, RFP thing. I mean, they'll find ways. They will. And there are, there are in city government, in anything, any bureaucracy, whether it be private or public, you're going to find folks that are going to try to circumvent or find loopholes or shortcuts to be able to get things done, for whatever reason it is. So,
Every
Johnson.
time they use that campaign slogan, get things done, you must make them add correctly or accurately, not just get it done. I can do that. Anybody can do that. It's getting it done well, sustainably.
Okay, I think we're ready
But
to.
This
I'm sorry,
idea is
please.
good.
Okay.
Give it a shot.
Is there public comment on this particular sub-item?
Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. I strongly agree with the sentiments I've heard, which is, it doesn't hurt to have it stated multiple times. And basically, I look at it as a constitutional issue for the simple fact is if I want to exercise my free speech rights under the First Amendment and my right to petition government, I have to have access to the documents necessary to do that. And by restricting my access to the documents, they actually restrict my free speech rights and rights to petition government. And so the presumption has to be that we state very clearly that the records belong to the citizens. They belong to you, they belong to me, not to the city departments, not to the city employees, not to the elected officials. They are our property. And they do not have the right to withhold that property unless there is a legal justification, and that is what they need to explain. I have held this because the law says I'm allowed to, because it's a safety issue or a security issue or something like that. Now, one thing I would like to comment on is the comment that Mr. Wolf made about the enforcement. I have mentioned this before, and I really do think that it is something that needs to be considered, and I don't know whether it is at this point or in these changes. But to me, the person who is responsible for each and every department is the head of that department. They are the one that has the legal responsibility under the law to ensure that not only they, but all of the employees under their purview follow this law. And yet consistently, the person is in here as a clerk or a supervisor who is unfortunately, I think we all know it, in some cases being told to withhold the documents and being put in this position of, what do I do? My boss is saying I need to withhold this, and I'm coming in here and trying to give you some thing that I even know makes no sense at all to justify what I'm being in the position to do. And that person who's the department head is the one who has to certify every year under the law that they understand sunshine, they understand their obligations under sunshine. And so really, I think that the letters of determination should not necessarily be directed to an individual employee, but to the head of the department. I was in the military for years. And I don't care who you are. If you send me a letter and you're not in my command and you tell me I have to do something, I'm going to look at that and I'm going to go to my boss and I'm going to say, what do you say? But if that person goes across to my boss and my boss comes, there's no question, I need to do it. And so I think the determinations need to go to the head of the department, the one who we have a recognizable legal obligation, someone who has signed a statement saying they understand the law and their requirements under the law, and that they have a responsibility for ensuring that that is done in their department. You'd get much, much better reactions.
Thank you. Thank you. That raises some interesting thoughts, very interesting thoughts about not about this, but about what should go in our orders of determination. Mr. Hartz, thank you very much for that. That's very enlightening. Okay, so we have an agreement then that Member Snyder is going to draft language relative to 67.1 and 67.27, is that correct? Okay. And that takes us, last but not least, to sub-item number 11, definitions. Certain terms in the ordinance, including file and complaint, have been identified as needing defining or explanation. Members? Member Johnson.
I had intended to bring a list kind of defining these, but I keep I keep getting more caught up in the lack of the definitions. I mean, the intent of this is that, as you can, again, it's the same idea that they're taking the words and defining them on their own. So in the Ethics Commission's regulations, proposed enforcement regulations of the Sunshine referrals, one of the things in their legal memo was that when they were doing interpreting the 40 days and the information that was inserted in Prop G under 6735, the enforcement provisions, where it talks about, any person can file a complaint. They said, well, file and complaint are not defined. So then they proceeded to define them on their own. So we need to, it's similar to the RFP, not having RFQ, or similar to the 6721E not having, it only applies to documents. So anytime someone, a person that's authorized doesn't show up, a respondent that's authorized doesn't show up for an open meeting law, every time you send that to ethics, they send it right back and say, well, it doesn't say that. So it's kind of similar to that. And I just haven't had a chance to write them down and think about their definitions.
Okay. Member Johnson, would you be agreeable then to doing that for the, what I'm thinking is we should have another special meeting 4 weeks from tonight, although I think we're getting to the point where it's really going to be too late to get it on this November's ballot, but we could aim for next June or the following November. That's where we are now. It's late April, and if we want to get this on the ballot in this November, we have to get a package to the supervisors, the supervisors we want to work with by mid-May.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think we're almost there.
well, we are almost there. But again, there's still some work to be done here. On item 7,
Yes.
sub-item 7, that needs to be done. Item 9 and item 10. We could put this on the agenda for our regular meeting, but no, we cannot. It's too late for that. We could hold another special meeting in early May.
Yes.
It would have to be, I believe, 2 weeks from today. Do we want to do that? Should I call a special meeting for 2 weeks from today? That would be May.
Yes, but Mr. Chair, I would request that you not include any complaints.
No,
So when
that would be on May 5th. Thursday, May 5th, 4 p.m.
Chris, when would you need any documents to put in the?
So the documents would have to be 1 week
April
from today.
20, through the chair, April 27th
April 27th.
evening.
Cinco de Mayo.
April 28th.
28th, sorry.
April
28th
28th.
evening.
Thursday, April 28th.
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Member Wolf?
Yeah, just a couple of things with regards to what Member Johnson was explaining with regards to 6735D. I mean, to me, the way I read the legal construction of that sentence, it's pretty clear that it's the Sunshine complaint. It's not the Ethics Commission's complaint. I understand that, but I think I agree with you that it should be defined that all complaints contained within the Sunshine Ordinance are complaints of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force and not of anybody else. I agree with you. With regards to number 9, there was one thing I wanted to add that I failed to, and I'm wondering if in that section we've always had this concern about documents that are so sensitive that they can't be presented here, that they say that they are, we can't even determine if they're public because they won't even let us see them. And I think there should be some provision for in camera, where it provides us the ability to go into a closed session so that we can view them where it cannot be revealed publicly, and then we can make a determination. Okay. We've spoken about that several times, that if we aren't able to do it legally, that maybe it be done, it would be referred to like a superior court to do that, where a judge can, in chambers, be able to review and then provide us with an opinion or a judgment, actually.
Would that be under number 9 or number 10? I think number 10 might be a little closer. Number 9 is specific to contract preparatory requests and responses.
Well, I would say yes, because when Mr. Kinsey came, well, I shouldn't say just Mr. Kinsey, but Mr. Kinsey on behalf of RPD, Rec and Park, he basically said that they don't even provide the RFP documents to the supervisors. They provide an executive summary, that they find them to be so secret that nobody, not even a public official, can see them, even in a closed session. They won't even provide them. So I think it includes both 9 and 10. I think that it's important that, that's what we're getting at here is the RFQ truly, an RFQ, or did they dress it up as an RFP and calling it an RFQ? I mean, or vice versa. There needs to be some oversight eyes on these things, and that's where we run into a lot of trouble. And then, people like the McClellans end up being at the butt end of things because they can't get access. And it is our job to be able to help determine whether those things are accessible or not. Can we enforce it? No. Can we compel people to do it? We can try. But, the ordinance doesn't provide us in its current state with much that we can do except refer it to somebody. All we can do is say, yeah, this is against the law, okay, and make that determination.
So where, if we were to add an in-camera authority provision, where would that go? Under enforcement, under...
Well, I think it has to do with where they feel that it's not disclosable. Any area of the ordinance where it allows or it makes provisions for items that are not disclosable, if they are presenting, if they are citing or stating that they are not required to disclose it under a certain section of the law, and it becomes questionable as to whether that document itself is public or not, we need to be able to see it. Okay. In order to make that determination. It's one of those rare occasions where a body gets to see it. They may not have a general practice of showing it to the supervisors or even to the mayor, but in this case, where it's being adjudicated, they all call us a quasi-adjudication. So where it's being adjudicated, I think it should be an exception. So I think anywhere.
Should we create a new section or a new subsection? Should it go under 6735, 6727?
I think it.
Again, if we're going to throw it in a whole number of sections,
Yeah, I agree.
So where do we want it
I
to
don't know,
appear?
maybe
Where do we
it
want
ne-
that language to appear?
Maybe it needs to be a new 6725. Is that far enough? Is that up far enough? No, it's not. So we should go maybe up to 6724. And then make it a sequitur. That's litigation, no? It goes draft memorandum. Public information that must be disclosed. Public review, maybe that's where it needs to start.
I think the in-camera provision deals with a matter of procedure.
How's that? Oh, you mean how?
In-camera authority is a procedural matter, and putting it on 6724, defining what is or isn't disclosable.
But what trips that wire? We need to put in there needs to be a tripwire.
Okay.
So first you need the tripwire, and then you have the process.
Well, how about justification of withholding?
Yeah. Okay.
We could add a 6727.
But you see, if you go back to 6724, it says, notwithstanding a department's legal discretion to withhold certain information under the California Public Records Act. That's the very first sentence. So I think you got to start there, because that's where the beginning of document disclosure actually begins, is with 6724.
Well, but that's identifying what is or isn't disclosable. Notwithstanding, the 6724 starts out notwithstanding, what.
I understand that, but I'm saying if you start out with, if you make a new 6724 and you start out with, except where there is legal discretion to withhold certain information under the CPRA, documents in question that are being held confidential or classified, or whatever words you want to use, secret, may be viewed in camera by the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force Commission, for the purposes of determining whether they're a public record or not.
That could go very easily under 6727E.
I understand that, but if you put it in before 6724, then in legal construction, it then starts there and follows all the way down to the bottom.
In that case,
otherwise, you're going to have to refer back to the top.
In that case, you should put the entire 6727 before 6724.
Yeah, I would say that might very well be. The question is about legal construction. I'm not an expert in legal construction.
I mean, I think if you
what I've gleaned from trying to learn it is that the concept of et sequitur, is important, because you start out with your definitions at the top. It carries all the way down to the bottom. So I'm kind of thinking in that way, because a lot of times you'll have, smart attorneys that will say, well, it's as stated down here at the bottom. It doesn't apply what's at top. It applies at what's at the bottom.
I mean, I think the biggest problem with the in-camera procedure is going to be just in enforcing it. Because if HIPAA, for example, tells an agency that they can't disclose it, and we say, well, the Sunshine Ordinance says you can show it to us, they're going to say, yeah, take a hike, buddy. And the reason they don't have to, because they're going to say, if we show it to you, we're in violation of federal law. The reason a judge can do it is because judges have power of contempt, and there's a judicial doctrine that's formed which says they can do it. And so in certain circumstances, but
Right.
I don't know for a fact, but I think they have to allow for briefing, and I don't think a judge can just unilaterally say, I'm going to look at it in camera. I think that I've never done that, but I think it's an involved process, and there are, years, if not centuries, of cases that have established that authority.
But I would state that. I would state, these items, that are covered under federal law would be in camera to a judge, of Superior Court or higher, that kind of thing.
Oh, you mean you You're talking about providing a procedure where it would go to a judge to look at it?
Yeah.
Or where we would look at it, the task force?
No, well, there would be both. Anything that would be covered under federal law, you know, if there was question as to whether a local agency can actually see that, then it would go to a court to be seen, a judge to be seen. If it's like an RFP, which is purely local, has nothing to do with the level at the state, and nothing at the state level, then we would get to see it. So I would.
Proprietary information is state law.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
again, I think it needs to be flushed out, but I think you can make you can split the baby basically, and say, you know, under these particular conditions it would go to, because the ordinance already speaks of being able to take things to court, you know, having things enforced in court. So there's no reason why we can't continue with that trend, and you know, it just needs to be flushed out as to how that works. I'm not familiar enough with the procedures of those kinds of things. So.
and I'm not either. Yeah.
But, you know.
Mr. Wolf?
You're going to ask me to look into this?
Well, do you want to? Do you want to draft a provision?
I'm not legally experienced enough. I would really have to sit down with some, legal counsel that has some legal construction or constitutional legislative construction experience to be able to, and then procedures to be able to do that.
So for the moment, perhaps regrettably, but for the moment, this appears to be off the table. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the moment.
Member Johnson, do you wish for our next special meeting in 2 weeks to draft a set of definitions that you feel would be more useful to our purpose?
Yeah, I can try to do that.
Okay, that's fine. Is there public comment on this sub-item?
Are you going to take general on hold?
Yes. Seeing none, public comment is closed, and we will now open this up to general public comment on just the general topic of amending the ordinance.
For those of you who are left, Ray Hartz, this is my American Mensa card. And I show you that not to brag, but to talk about something that gets me so incensed about a lot of these issues. Is I sit to myself, I'm in the top 2% as far as intelligence goes in the country. And I read the documents that I go to all these public meetings, the police commission, the library commission, and so forth, and it says, know your rights under sunshine. And yet, I look at it and I say, God, it's taken me 4 years to get to the point where I can construct a case that I have a reasonable chance of actually getting a determination, finding someone in violation of something, which they so clearly are. And I watch other people come in and they have no idea of what the law is, and they have no idea what they're supposed to do or how to do it or how to frame the argument. And who they're opposing is a department that has a vested interest of withholding documents or denying public comment, supported by city attorneys and other staff members who basically have learned how to manipulate the system to keep doing what they're doing. And I'm a law-abiding citizen. Basically, I have to say I've been very lucky in that in all my time in the Navy and time working with federal and state government in Hawaii, I was very, very lucky to find that almost all the people I interacted with in government were the kind of people that if you took the law to them and you simply said, here's what it says, they would go, oh, well, okay, we'll do it. And in the last 4 years, I have consistently found people in the city government, in city boards and commissions, and they don't care if it's the law. What they will do, in fact, especially in commissions, you say, this is the law. Oh, is he talking to us? And they just ignore you. Now, I'm going to come back to one other thing that I think Mr. Garza touched on earlier, and it's something I've talked to you about before, and it's going back to the old expression about purer than Caesar's wife. You know, there are a lot of problems with the way you guys do business. The timeliness of putting the cases on the agenda, the timeliness of responses, questions that Mr. Garza asked and other people I've heard asking before, and you cannot enforce a law if your own credibility is in question. If people can look at you and say, well, you know, yeah, you're telling us we have to do it, but gee, I've seen you not do it. That was why I was a little upset about the change in the agenda. If you put out an agenda and you say we're going to handle this as 3 separate items, and then just before the person's supposed to present his or her case, you get up and say, okay, now we're going to take all those items and jam them together and you've got 5 minutes. What does that do to them? I think it puts them in a wholly untenable position. That was my objection. I think that the agendas put out, there are proper ways of changing the agenda. If not, you stick to the agenda. Like I told you last night, and I'm gonna take 1 extra minute if I may. I went to a police commission meeting last night. They did agenda item number 1, which was just the consent calendar. They immediately went to agenda item number 5, spent 2 hours on that, and then went into closed session and said, everybody get out. And it was amazing how quickly, when they came back after an hour and a half of closed session, how they got everything done because all the members of the public were told to leave. And you say something to them and they just go, oh, well, we control our agenda. And I said, yeah, you control your agenda, but I have the right to point out how your control of the agenda is disenfranchising so many people. And it is just so, so wrong.
Thank you. That takes us back to the top item on our agenda, the possible response to the Ethics Commission staff ruling on
Mr. Chair?
Member
Before
Wolf?
we move on, I just was wondering if this might not be a good time to put together that little ad hoc group to start strategizing for presenting the amendments to supervisors.
Okay.
And I think it would be helpful to at least identify them, and then so that they can just begin to talk shop about what the best practice might be for that. I don't know that the procedures of how we are going to go about doing it are needing to be part of the public record, but I think we should at least identify who the group will be, and they can bring back a report or what have you.
Well, right off the top, I would think that you and Member Johnson, Member Johnson's declining.
You do not want me to ask this.
Okay.
I'm certainly happy to help if I can. But
I'll go with whatever you feel. I'm not going to make any judgments on you
I would certainly listen
or observations.
what I had to say, but I think that, the personality there,
I mean,
impede reason.
I think at least yourself and myself, and we should have one other person.
There are also, would the other members be consulted or be able to have a say? Because I don't.
Other members of the task force?
Yeah, other members of the
Sure.
task force.
Well, certainly. I'm guessing that Member Cawthon would want in some way to participate in this. She's tied up with a whole bunch of civic organizations, including San Francisco Tomorrow and Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods.
But in whatever decision you make, that group makes, would it come before the full task force? Because there are certain supervisors that I don't believe,
All right, there are about probably 4, maybe 5 supervisors we could count on.
See, I completely disagree with counting on them, and that's what I want the full board to be able to discuss, not so that I can control it, but just so that we can all have a say. Like there's a thing that happened in the 80s when the big hair bands were on the Sunset Strip, and that was that, you know, some record companies wouldn't want another record company to get a band, so they would take that band and put them on a shelf, and that band would never see the light of day, even if they were good. But they really just did it to prevent the other people from doing anything with it. And I think that happens at the board. And I think that some people trust some of the supervisors and they shake their heads yes, but what they're really doing is holding it so that at the very end they can control what happens to it. And I would like for everybody to be able to discuss that, because I know that I frequently disagree with even Member Wolf on who those people are.
I agree.
So I don't know how that would work, but you know, vigorous discussion about it would be helpful.
I'm wondering if maybe member Kneber, he was, I know he was active, I think it was in Telegraph Hill Dwellers. Ms. Washburn, I don't know how you know, she's with the League of Women Voters, so I don't know how tied in she would be with certain supervisors, but we can ask her.
That might be actually a very good choice, because they're so well respected, and every candidate makes sure they attend their forum, because it's one of the more highly respected forums.
Okay, so we can ask Member Wolf, Member Washburn, Member Costa, would you feel how would you feel about participating in this, Member Jackson or Member West? Do you how close are you with any of the supervisors? How well connected are you politically? What?
Yeah, I'm not. Sorry, I'm not particularly well connected politically. I do have a personal relationship. Anyway, I was friends with the supervisor before she came supervisor, but beyond that, nothing. So.
Okay, and do you feel that friendship could be used here to further what we're doing?
Possibly. I don't know. My only other concern was that in my previous work as a freelance reporter, there are any number of supervisors or issues that current supervisors would disagree with me on that could be used as reference. So, you know.
Thugs, me and Member West.
May I make a suggestion?
Member Wolf?
I would just say that that let's create the ad hoc committee, in general, and we'll have a public, discussion, but any member of the board of the task force might attend that ad hoc committee and be part of that discussion. But the actual people who will go and shop it around will be specific.
I think if we're going to do that, we have to be very careful about quorum considerations.
Well, but it'll be an open and public meeting. Well, unless we're going to create because I would just say that it'd be purely for having just input and discussion versus having the smaller group, determine how they're going to approach somebody, or when they're going to call them, or, are they going to take them out for coffee or something like that, which is different. I'm not saying that needs to be publicized and shouldn't be.
Well, we need to be very careful on that. You know, we are a public body, and if we're going to start doing things in secret, we're doing it, I think, at great risk.
I don't know.
Even an ad hoc committee.
Well, I'm not saying the ad hoc committee meets in secret. I'm saying that the people who are identified, who have all that information discussed out front, when it comes time to go shop it around, they're going to have the flexibility to be able to say, well, I don't think it needs to be publicized that we're meeting this person on this particular day at this particular time at this particular place, and for I don't think that that's required. I don't. It's not an actionable item.
All right. Well, right now we have three of us: Member Wolf, Member Wasper, and myself. That's an odd-numbered committee, and that should work. Fair enough? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we will have to decide which of us is to approach which supervisor, or which two of us, perhaps. Mm-hmm. Okay. Member Johnson?
Considered, I don't know if this is something that is public or a strategy thing, but State Senator Leland Yee is running for mayor, and he's had a number of sunshine-related issues that he wants to, use in his mayor campaign. He might be able to be persuasive in some way with someone.
Possibly. We can I have occasional contact with Senator Yee. He knows me, and he speaks to me anyway. And perhaps at some point we can bring him in on this. It might work to our advantage. Okay. Member Snyder, Member Costa.
I have to leave in 5 minutes, and when I leave, I'm afraid the quorum is going to be destroyed, right?
Okay.
So I was going to suggest, it seems to me that having the letter that you wrote sent soon would be a good idea. Maybe, should we just send the letter, just to have Chair Nee go ahead and send the letter? I've looked at it. I think I agree with it generally. We could tinker with the language forever, but I think it serves the purpose.
Does it say what we need to say?
I think it says what we need.
Yeah, my only adjustment to it would be on page 2, where the second point is being made, that instead of our response being focused on our bylaws, that we divert the focus to be on the ordinance.
Well, the thing is that St. Croix uses that bylaws thing as an excuse. And what I'm saying is our bylaws are irrelevant.
Right.
That's what I state in the letter.
Right, but I think there needs to be more he needs to own up that the ordinance takes precedent, and that even though you're telling him that the bylaws are not relevant, I think he needs to be reminded that that the ordinance is what's prime, and that's what controls what the task force does. The bylaws are specific in the ordinance around attendance issues and things like that. Attendance for us as members. It's bylaws regarding how we operate, not necessarily our interaction with the public.
Well, that's what I state here. The bylaws of the task force and its subcommittees are guidelines of conduct and procedure for those entities and their officers and members, nothing more.
Right.
They are not intended to set forth requirements or prescriptions for members of the public, including interested parties, in cases that come before the task force.
But I think it needs to be said that his comment is incorrect. You're saying that it's incorrect,
yeah.
But we need to correct them. And reading further down, it's not. I think we just need to say, you know, your issue is governed by, or your premise or your argument is governed by the Sunshine Ordinance and the Sunshine Ordinance only, and not our bylaws.
Yeah, but that's not addressing what he said. I mean, you're going to have to put what exactly where that is. I tried to do this. I tried so hard to take his rules and figure out a way to state what. I mean, you're arguing over whether or not it allows for more than one hearing, not whether our bylaws are representative at all.
He's just reading a requirement into this ordinance that's not there. That's all he's doing.
No, he's not. He's not. Did you
Fundamentally,
read it?
yeah, I did. He's saying that at core, what he's saying is that the ordinance doesn't require the presence of anybody from the respondent at any of the committee meetings. And I think the argument is because the Sunshine Ordinance doesn't establish the committees, the bylaws do, but the ordinance doesn't say anything about where specifically the attendance of the respondents are required. It just says that the task force can have meetings and it can require the respondents to show up. And he's reading into that they can only.
The problem is that it says that they can have a hearing. It doesn't say they can have meetings. And our bylaws don't say that the Complaint and Amendments Committee hears anything.
Doesn't matter what our bylaws say.
But, I mean, yeah, it's just that you'd have to put if you read what they're saying, their argument, while I do not agree with it, is a valid interpretation. I don't want to say valid, but it's a reasonable case that they're stating. So we need to make a reasonable case back. Otherwise, one other thing is that it's starting to be kind of a drag that we keep mentioning that Bay Citizen org, that the negative part of it. So I would like to not mention that. I don't want people to keep. The more we state that these authority figures have looked down on the task force, the more with more frequency, the people that already side with them have more and more ammunition to keep siding with them. So I don't mind referencing the Bay Citizen article, but it needs to be less about what they said about us and more about how it's not being enforced when you mention it. Otherwise, you're providing a lot of power, because all those commissioners like Mr. St. Croix and they like their staff, and they're going to look at that and they're going to read that. I don't know if this is something that we could look at and do it on the 26th, but
I would just say, the problem with the bylaws is in 6730E, it describes what our bylaws specifically are.
And there's nothing in there about a meeting.
No, it just says, shall approve bylaws specifying a general schedule for meetings, requirements for attendance by task force members, and procedures and criteria for removing members for non-attendance. That's it. It's all the bylaws are supposed to contain.
Okay.
So, as far as what he's saying, that's why I'm saying what he's saying doesn't apply. He's making this up.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, you know what? You're looking at the wrong document. Look at the ordinance. And whatever the Sunshine Ordinance and its makeup is, that's what people are required to show up for.
Well, okay, at this point, I think would be, given all of the suggestions that have come in now, I think for me to send this out now would be premature. I think we need to, let's put this on the agenda for 2 weeks from today.
Yeah.
that
Okay.
seems too far.
We're losing a quorum.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I
All right.
go.
The chair will entertain a motion for adjournment. We have lost a quorum. We are adjourned.